Welcome to another change-making conversation from Baptist News Global. You're listening to a special podcast series titled Highest Power, Church and State, featuring writer, poet, and musician Rick Pidcock. Now here's Rick.
One of the most controversial topics, especially since the debate debacle that led to President Biden withdrawing his candidacy in 2024, has been Biden's health. In the aftermath of that debate, Democrats began calling for Biden to withdraw from the race, but said he was still healthy enough to remain president. Republicans, on the other hand, said if he's not healthy enough to run for president, then he should resign for the final few months in office. Conspiracy theories began spreading about Biden having dementia, which joined the long tradition of conspiracies about Biden even being dead and replaced with actors pretending to be him. So with all of that brewing in the background, on Sunday, President Biden's office announced that he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer that had spread to his bones. Biden wrote on Monday, quote, "Cancer touches us all. Like so many of you, Jill and I have learned that we are strongest in the broken places. Thank you for lifting us up with love and support." One of Biden's aides said on Tuesday that Biden had a prostate-specific antigen test in 2014 and that, quote, prior to Friday, President Biden had never been diagnosed with prostate cancer, unquote. While some wonder why it took so long for him to get a diagnosis, a 2014 study in the UK revealed that 46% of cancer diagnoses happen during a late stage. So how have people responded to Biden's announcement about his diagnosis? Former President Barack Obama said, quote, "Nobody has done more to find breakthrough treatments for cancer in all its forms than Joe, and I am certain he will fight this challenge with his trademark resolve and grace. We pray for a fast and full recovery." Even Marjorie Taylor Greene said, "I'm sorry to see this news. Cancer is truly awful. My dad passed away in 2021 with cancer. Prayers for Joe Biden and his family." In President Trump's first statement, he said, quote, "Melania and I are saddened to hear about Joe Biden's recent medical diagnosis. We extend our warmest and best wishes to Jill and the family, and we wish Joe a fast and successful recovery." But as the hours ticked by, some of the MAGA movement just couldn't help themselves. In a report for Baptist News Global, Jeff Brumley wrote, "It didn't take MAGA world long to hurl insults and conspiracy theories after learning former President Joe Biden has been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer. While progressive and conservative politicians and pundits alike were quick to offer wishes for a speedy recovery, Trump's most ardent supporters and his own son wasted no time posting an array of accusations and criticisms aimed at the 82-year-old Biden and his wife, Jill Biden, and his inner circle. What I want to know is, how did Dr. Jill Biden miss stage 5 metastatic cancer, or is this yet another cover-up? Donald Trump Jr., the president's oldest son, queried on X. This is an effort to push the fact Biden was running the country as a vegetable under the rug, one commenter said. Without question, Trump Jr. replied. Laura Loomer added, "To all of you praying for Joe Biden, can you pray for the people he killed with his open border policies instead? Oh, boo-hoo, he's such a good guy. Boo-hoo, he's such a fighter. No, he's not. And no, he's not. He is going down in history as the worst U.S. president ever." And here was Representative Warren Davidson on the diagnosis.
Well, stage 4 cancer diagnosis, particularly the kind that they're referencing, is a brutal diagnosis. I mean, I feel terrible for anyone that would go through that, even somebody who I really don't like much as Joe Biden, but it's a terrible thing for him and his family. So I hope he beats it. But look, I don't believe that they just found out Friday, but because they're not credible on anything they've done. And you highlighted it's kind of concurrent with this release of the Hur tapes, which frankly Congress subpoenaed, and Merrick Garland as Attorney General was in contempt of Congress. He had no problem holding everybody else accountable for contempt of Congress, but he wouldn't even comply with the subpoena. So, the whole thing was a big cover up, and I suspect that this cancer diagnosis is part of that whole scheme.
Here's the thing. President Biden lost his son to cancer. People who go through cancer don't tend to use their cancer as cover-up schemes. It tends to be a very deeply personal journey that affects you forever. But conspiracies about a cover-up scheme kept coming. Here was President Trump himself talking with the media about it.
I think it's very sad actually. I'm surprised that it wasn't, the public wasn't notified a long time ago, because to get to stage 9, that's a long time. When you take tests, medical, as a male, that test is very standard. I don't know if it's given to everybody, but it's given just about. And it takes a long time to get to that situation. Now, I think, to get to a stage 9, I think that if you take a look, it's the same doctor that said that Joe was cognitively fine. There was nothing wrong with him.
A lot of people have jumped on Trump saying that Biden has stage 9 cancer because there are actually only 4 stages. Some have wondered where on earth Trump came up with the number 9 from. My guess is that he said 9 based on the fact that Biden's office said his cancer was, quote, characterized by a Gleason score of 9, grade group 5, unquote. A Gleason score is different from a stage. The Gleason score measures how quickly cancer cells can grow or spread, while the stage details how much it already has spread. A Gleason score is often used with prostate cancer and ranges from 6 to 10, so a Gleason score of 9 is quite aggressive. Stage is used to show how far the cancer has spread from where it began, whether it's spread to the lymph nodes or to other parts of the body or to the bones. So yes, Trump was spreading false information. But no, it probably wasn't a number completely pulled out of a hat. It was likely a misunderstanding of what a Gleason score is and how it's different from stages. But Trump wasn't the only one to jump in. Here was Vice President J.D. Vance.
Yeah, look, I mean, first of all, of course, we wish the best for the former president's health. And, it sounds pretty serious, but hopefully he makes the right recovery. Look, I will say, whether the right time to have this conversation is now or at some point in the future, we really do need to be honest about whether the former president was capable of doing the job. And that's no, that you can separate the desire for him to have the right health outcome with the recognition that whether it was doctors or whether there were staffers around the former president, I don't think he was able to do a good job for the American people. And that's not politics. That's not because I disagreed with him on policy. That's because I don't think that he was in good enough health. In some ways, I blame him less than I blame the people around him. And why didn't the American people have a better sense of his health picture? Why didn't the American people have more accurate information about what he was actually dealing with? This is serious stuff. And this is the guy who carries around the nuclear football for the world's largest nuclear arsenal. This is not child's play, and we can pray for good health, but also recognize that if you're not in good enough health to do the job, you shouldn't be doing the job.
According to Vance, his comments aren't politics. But why bring up Biden's ability to do his job after a cancer diagnosis unless you're implying what so many others in the MAGA movement are implying? That there is a cover-up that includes Biden's prostate cancer. One of the most common evidences put forth for saying they knew is this audio from Biden himself admitting he had cancer in 2022.
And because it was a 4-lane highway that was accessible, my mother drove us, and rather than us be able to walk. And guess what? The first frost, you know what was happening? You had to put on your windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer. And why can't, for the longest time, Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation.
So was Biden in 2022 trying to hint to us or trying to tell us that he has cancer and all of his Democratic handlers were keeping it from us? When Biden made these comments in 2022, people started asking questions. But the White House said at the time that he was talking about skin cancer treatments he had in the past, rather than a current diagnosis that was being hidden from the public. And this week, with all the controversy swirling about Biden's health, CNN's Jake Tapper released a book called Original Sin: President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. Tapper co-authored the book with Alex Thompson of Axios. So according to Tapper, quote, one person told us that the presidency was, at best, a 5-person board with Joe Biden as chairman of the board, unquote. He told NPR that the White House staff began cordoning him off from people in 2023, so members of Congress who went into the White House Christmas party in December 2022 didn't see him again in the flesh, many of them until December 2023, and they were shocked at what they saw, unquote. The book even claims, quote, Biden's physical deterioration, most apparent in his halting walk, had become so severe that there were internal discussions about putting the president in a wheelchair, but they couldn't do so until after the election, unquote. And all of this leads to questions about the media as well. How was this happening in the White House without questions being asked? Tapper told NPR, quote, the news media is in a crisis. Reporters in general, CNN, NPR, ABC, CBS, all of us, people don't trust us. One of the reasons they don't trust us is what just happened with Joe Biden and his acuity and the fact that we in the media were pretty late to the story. I should say we in the legacy media were late to that story because conservative media was not late to it. And I think that we are in an existential fight for free press. Not that it's going to be taken away, but it certainly runs the risk of not thriving as it has. And that just calls on us to be as good and professional as possible, unquote. One thing that's clear in all of this is that there's a lot of partisan back and forth, and a lot of casting accusations, and a lot of making excuses. Of course, the conservative media called Biden's health into question. That doesn't mean that they would have been fine with Biden if he had been 30 years younger, or that they're medical experts. It probably just means they're the conservative media members who couldn't stand Joe Biden. And of course, the Democrats should have been more transparent about his health issues. The fact that they weren't doesn't mean they were part of some conspiracy to try to control the government or anything. It was probably because they were scared of the alternative, which is actually a pretty horrific alternative, Donald Trump. The reality is that there are a lot of things that are simultaneously true here. So rather than getting caught up in partisan back and forths, we should respond to each truth with an appropriate reaction. Blaming the other keeps the cycle of retribution going. It doesn't allow for accountability. MAGA's desire to prosecute Jill Biden for elder abuse in the wake of her husband's cancer diagnosis is ridiculous. But so is any refusal on the part of the Democrats to question the health and competency of Biden during his presidency. Biden has cancer, so our response should be to lament, perhaps to pray for his recovery. Biden had a lot of red flags regarding his mental health, and it was on full display during that debate. So our response should be to take an honest look at what happened. The media didn't cover his health well enough, so we need to recommit to covering those in power in a way that prioritizes truth over fear. Unfortunately, due to white evangelicals, Trump was the alternative. So, in that sense, our response should be anger and a full deconstruction of the white evangelical theologies and ethics that led them to choosing him enthusiastically as the alternative. Trump is hindering cancer research, so our response should also be anger and exposing what the Trump administration is doing and how it's harming ourselves and our neighbors. And then we should invest in whatever ways we can to help cancer research. For any conservative who is responding with lament, our response to them should be to be present with them in the lament of Joe Biden's cancer. For those who are responding with mockery, again, our response should be anger and exposure of that. Those who are suffering with cancer need your presence, not your politics. They need your compassion, not your conspiracies about the other side. The reality is that there are a lot of very concerning issues right now that people with cancer are having to face. And so many of the challenges are completely unnecessary fruits of the constant back and forth with no willingness to confront each truth on its own terms with an appropriate reaction. For those who don't know, my wife Ruth Ellen was diagnosed in 2021 with stage 3 breast cancer. And the challenges we faced dealing with cancer in the aftermath of COVID with 5 kids at home were seemingly unbearable at times. Some of our conservative evangelical family and friends told us they wished we were members of a church during the cancer treatments. But the churches we had spent our lives in would have expected us to frame our journey in a very specific language that would center the glory and sovereignty of God through our suffering. And we were actually very glad to be away from that world during her cancer. When she would come home from work and collapse on the couch, the last thing I needed to do was properly brand my words for a glory hierarchy. I needed the headspace to be present with whatever challenge we were facing in that moment. In a similar way, our response to Biden's cancer needs to not be about promoting a political brand or hierarchy. Instead, our response should be to be present with whatever challenge we're facing. We should be able to ask questions and hold Democrats accountable for allowing Biden to hang on that long to power without lumping conspiracies about Biden's cancer into it, and without running to Trump as the only alternative. The reality is that our healthcare system is in crisis due to our unwillingness to be present with each truth. Ruth Ellen and I experienced this firsthand in 2023 as we received the shocking news 2 days before her final cancer surgery, or what we thought would be her final surgery, that the South Carolina Attorney General's office was investigating her for Medicaid fraud. Suddenly, rather than focusing on healing and rest, we had to spend all our money hiring a lawyer to deal with an absolute disaster of a system. For my article this week, I'm sharing our story for the first time, and it should be published either Thursday or Friday, so be on the lookout for that at baptistnews.com. Also, I'll send you the link straight to your inbox if you sign up for my Substack at Rick Pidcock. But my point is that we have a lot that we need to deal with, and we need to be working through these things in a way that's not reactionary to the other side and conspiratorial about the other side, but in a way that is willing and honest to face whatever truth needs to be faced, and to take whatever consequences need to be taken. And a big part of that needs to be moving into these controversial stories with more human emotions like lament and grief and celebrating one another. Because if we're always just looking through the lens of a team, we're never going to really break down these hierarchies, and we're never going to love our neighbors as ourselves. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and rate us on your favorite podcast platform, and we'll be back with another episode on Monday.
This has been another change-making conversation from Baptist News Global. The episode you've just heard is part of a special podcast series titled Highest Power, Church and State. Be sure to follow BNG daily at baptistnews.com and subscribe to get notifications about future episodes. Baptist News Global is a national nonprofit news service that is independent, free, and faithful. BNG is supported by readers and listeners like you. Learn more at baptistnews.com.